Welcome to another Boxes to Builds. This is going to be a totally different type of format in that normally they send me all the stuff to build and we send it back. However, in this particular instance, the person who wants these golf clubs is delivering some of the parts. Where's he coming from? That's right, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Now, Cedar Rapids, Iowa is kind of important to me because that's where I was living when I got out of the Navy. All right, that was my first job. I was working in the commercial nuclear power industry, and it was in Cedar Rapids for Iowa Electric. And I left there to come here to Ohio to deal with uranium enrichment. And he's a Marine, an embassy Marine, which is a different kind or a different type of training. You know, using the military, using Iowa, using Cedar Rapids, he's bringing it, and he wants to do club making. Because, again, the world getting smaller, the golf course that he wants to work at is the golf course that I first started golfing at. And it's called St. Andrews. Imagine that. But it's just on the edge of the little burg called Hiawatha in Cedar Rapids, which is right where I lived. And so we're going to build some clubs. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of take you through step by step format in order to get you from point A to point B. And the point A being getting all the pieces parts. Point B, let's swing the golf club. We're going to go in the shop. We'll meet the new guy and let's build some golf clubs. All right, what you saw from day one is the beginning process, how we build, how we, getting started, everything you need to get started. Now, what you're not going to hear is a whole bunch about me talking to him. Why? Well, when we started recording, I had the music playing in the background. And when we do that, I run into copyright infringement and I don't want to get in trouble. So you're not going to hear us talking, but what I'm going to do is kind of narrate a little bit. That way you can get the idea of what it was all about. Now, it was a fairly long day, and we're going to compress a couple hours into a couple of minutes so you guys get the idea. You'll see him doing some of the process. You'll see us, talking about it, and I'll give you guys an idea of what was going on. So when we go to day two, hopefully it looks a little bit better for you. What you're seeing right now is Richard and I are talking about weighing and making sure all the equipment is in line, right? So when you do, when you're doing the club heads, you want to make sure you have a 7-gram width, and it's give or take, right? If it's 7 grams right on the button is perfect. Give or take 1 or 2, not a big deal. Or give or take 1 either direction, not a big deal. You start getting 2, 3, 4 out, then you got to start looking at adding weight, okay? Now the question becomes, if you have one that is super heavy, what do you do? Right? So you can, well, it depends on what, like every other golf answer, it depends. What is it that the rest of the set did? All right, so you got to look at shaft weights, grip weights, all that kind of stuff. So in this particular case, we're using mid-sized grips, so they're going to be slightly heavier. If you came around with a heavier head, you could add weight to all the other heads to bring them up into spec with the other ones. And you probably would like the swing weight if you were looking for standard swing weight. If you were looking for something a bit lighter, well, then that's problematic. Somebody's going to tell you, well, yeah, just go ahead and grind a little bit of weight off. Well, that's all grand and everything, except for that these have coatings on them. And when you remove the coating, particularly on forged clubs, they're going to rust. Nobody likes that, especially when it's not on the face. So you're either going to have to eat it or you could back weight it. And then in my opinion, I'm not a big back weighting fan just to get swing weight because all you're doing is adding weight. You just might have to live with the fact that that one's heavier. Now, when you get to a builder guy like me and we find that, we either eat it and tell the golfer or we call them up and have them send us a different head. It just depends on the build. Or you can add the weight and make the swing weights heavier. That's what that's all about. So you got to know everything that you have before you do work. And that's true with everything. Whether you're doing a maintenance project, going on a trip, it doesn't matter. You always get your stuff, you get your little checklist, you make sure you got it all, make sure it's in the right order, and that way everything else goes smoother. And the last part is the frequency matching. Now, how does one do frequency matching? Well, I've done a few. If you go up here, I've done bunches of boxes to builds, and I'll throw a few up that direction and we'll show you. But bottom line is, if you have the frequency machine, you start with your highest club and you start with nothing. You start with no tip trimming. Put the head on using the fishing line and check what your frequency is. And then when you know what your frequency is at that particular length, then you know how much you have to trim to get where you want to go. And using that as the basis for what we need to do, then you can know what to trim the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, all based on the head weights. Once that's accomplished, we set them over here by the assembly area, get the glue done, get the ferrules picked, put them up for the dry, and then we're on to the next day. The next day is going to be promising in that we're going to show the ferrule finishing, the final trimming, and the gripping, the loft and lie adjustments, and then the final what Mr. Ralston thought. So stay with us, and then that way you can see a whole set of clubs being put together for the first time. Day 2 of the Cedar Rapids Boxes to Builds build. Mr. Ralston came in here, of course, from Cedar Rapids, took a class at the Golf Works, came down and visited, and it was funny because me being from Cedar Rapids, we had a kind of a connection. Well, he's found a situation in Cedar Rapids where somebody of this skill set would probably do pretty good. There's a lot of golf to be played, hardly anybody doing something like this, and somebody with the skill sets for good fitting, good repairs, good equipment could probably do pretty good. He came back, he wanted me to build him his set of the new level 902s, KBS Tour 105s, and some Golf Pride grips. Now, he wanted me to show him how to build them, and it turned into me showing him a couple and him building. And that's the way I prefer it, right? The more that you work on your own stuff, the more skills, the more experience you get, and the better product. And the funny part is that this is going to be, he don't know it yet, but these are going to be display pieces of how he does work. They're going to go and grab his stuff and look at his stuff and put it back in the bag, and they're going to compare and wonder if that's going to be worth it for them. Well, that's the reason why you do this. So today, we're doing the finishing work. Now, you've seen a lot of this before, but this time, we're going to show me showing Mr. Ralston and then him doing it. And it's going to be ferrule prepping, which you guys know I'm just crazy about that. And then we're going to do some shaft cutting to length. We're going to do some gripping, and we'll probably get into some detail about that. Final bends and checks, clean up, and then he's out of here. And he's going home. So we're starting kind of early. It's 7:30ish right now, and we're getting this thing started, waiting for him to show up because he's got a long drive back to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Let's go finish some clubs. All right, beginning of day 2. Always check that. Right, nice and hard, good to go. We're going to do ferrules. We're going to do ferrules. Like doing anything with ferrules, we take our tape off, wrap it around, and all it is to protect the shaft, right? Now, if you're using the felt belt, that's really not too much of a need. But if you're using a paper belt, or if you have a very, 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 very fine sandpaper, you're going to need it because it will mar the shaft, and that's not what we want. So as a precaution, just every time, so I have it part of my process, we always wrap the shaft. 1x42 belt sander, felt belt. It's running at 1800 RPMs. If it goes any faster, you run the risk of burning. Right, okay. You see the smaller ones, the 1x36s, 2x36, they run at like 3600 RPM. When that happens and you really lean into it, it disappears quick. Hence the slower fine works a lot better. Okay? And
if I make a mistake, will it actually scar up on this belt?
It'll give you a flat spot.
Flat spot.
It'll give you a flat. That's the whole idea. So when we go to do this, now this is all set up for a lefty. On the righty, they have these bars that will sit here, and you can go this way. Okay. What I like doing is I apply pressure with this hand and I rotate with this hand. So you get in here and you rotate into the turning, right? And as it's going around, you can see it's already making some, and it doesn't take very much. It just doesn't, because this is a soft plastic, right? And this is, it's not real hard, but it takes off the material. Go around 1 or 2 times, and the whole idea is to check the finish right here. Now on these, they're pretty close, so it's just going to be a real quick, right? But on the irons, they're sticking over a little bit more. So if we try
What does
that.
the belt do to the hosel then?
Nothing. It'll look like that, but it doesn't do anything to the paint. That's the reason why these felt belts are so cool. So you just...
You have to be so careful there.
No, and then you see how much smoother it just became? Okay. So we'll do another one. And you just get in there. You don't have to go too, just a couple around. You just feel what that does. That's the transition you're looking for, right? Just because.
Fingernail test?
Yeah, pretty much. So when you get into anybody else's shop, the very first thing, if anybody's any quality, is going to be doing like this.
Okay.
And they're going to go, oh, yeah. You're not really all there, right? Now we're into yours.
You can almost see it.
Yeah, that's the idea. You can almost see it coming off.
Yeah.
All righty. Your shot. So now we're going to be removing tape because we don't need it anymore. As Richard was pointing out, was that if you don't have that, you do hand sanding. So what have you been using?
800 and 400 grit. And if it's too rough, if it goes over the hosel really thick, then I use a really rougher sandpaper to get that down there real close, and then I go back to the 400 and then finish up with the 800.
There you go. I just happen to have a roll of emery cloth, which is, much more
That's what I use.
soft. Yeah.
for my-
And it just goes around the ferrule. It just goes around the ferrule real easy. All right, next thing, we got to shine them back up now that we made them dull. The easiest ways to do this one is you take it and you just go opposite the way that you just turned the last one. Just up and down. There you go. And just a light pressure will get it, right? And the best part is that you're removing all the lines that we put on it as well. And that way you know you're getting it. You'll notice that the more acetone that's on here, the more gooey, the shinier it leaves the ferrule. So what you look for here is, you see how that's removing stuff? All right, it's like shoe polish kind of setup. So when you're doing it, you don't want to lay into it too much because you could be removing too much material, and we don't want that. What you want to do is nice light so that it just smooths it right back out, and that's what we're looking for. This is Glanz Wax, or now it's called yellow polish that you can get from most places. And now what we've done is, we know we've made it nice and shiny. Just like waxing your car, it gives you that little bit of protection on the outside. This makes that hard.
Okay.
All right.
Can we touch the ferrule then?
Oh yeah, we're gonna.
Okay.
That's the whole idea.
Oh, okay.
So we get in here, and we just a couple rotations around, and then we turn around and sit. For me, I just turn around and sit here. So you use your hand as a guide against the motor, just like this. Only this is here, and you're just leaning into it just enough to polish it, just like that. That's all you're doing. Okay. Now we saw some glue boogers on this one we're going to flick off. And you remember you're rotating into it. Basically all you're doing is you're putting it the other way. See, all you're doing is you're just putting a coat of wax on it basically. But it's super hard. using this is that even though it is a polish, it is an abrasive still.
Oh.
So this is like a 2000 grit or whatever you might want to call it,
Okay.
right? And so if you go into it and you have like a painted surface that you let the hosels on, that if you lean into it pretty good, you can start removing paint. Now, it would take a lot. It would take an extraordinary amount of pressure, but keep in mind that soft paint, soft polishes, soft coverings, you can get into it because this does shine up stuff. That's the whole idea of it, and that's what a polish does. So we want to keep an eye on that. All right, so 38-inch 5-iron, we got it set, you know, because you've got one of these, so the line and the loft and the line. Make it so it's nice and even. We do another check at 38-inch. If it's there, we do it, and then just so we don't, see we have 2 lines?
Yes.
Put an X through that one. That way when you go to cut, you're not looking for the wrong line.
Right.
All right, let's keep going. So we got Now comes a moment of truth. Now what I like doing is we saw on our head weights, right, your pitching wedge, and that went down, that was about a 4-degree span, right?
Yes.
So that's telling us that we need to come down a little bit. Some gap wedges are made to be the same length as the pitching wedge. Some are not. Normally it's gauged by the head weight, right? So it's a little heavier, so we know we're going to go just a tiny bit shorter. In this case, we're only going to go 1/4 inch.
Shorter.
Yep, and
That's a difference between the head weight of the
so
clubs.
we'll go 1/4 inch shorter to here to the 50. Well, you see how much it changes right here?
Right.
All right, so we'll go 1/4 inch here, 1/4 inch for those 2, and then 1/4 inch for that one.
Okay.
Okay. It's pulling down. So you're doing it right. Just a little bit less time. And there, just like that. Make sure you got the right line. Put the blade right in the middle of it and go. First things first, we measured out all those grips beforehand, right?
Yes, we did.
All right, so we get in here. So here's how we did with Mrs. McGolf.
This is the heaviest one.
All right, so we'll leave this one for the very end. We'll leave that up there. Since we're starting at all we're doing is taping at this point.
Okay.
So, kind of a gauge. You know, this thing's got that big rubber butt right there, right? Mm-hmm. So right there, go to the little marker right there.
Okay.
And that tells you how long it needs to be. Or that's as far as you want it to go. All right.
What is the rule of thumb of how much you should have hang over here?
What I use is basically a knuckles worth.
Okay.
And it depends. Now there's 2 ways of doing this. You can either twist it and push it in,
right,
or you fold it over and push it in.
I twist it and put it in.
Yep. And you can go either way. And we'll just start back in here again. So you get back into that. So you make the same mark. Again, that's a limit, not necessarily a requirement. All right, so if you're a little short, it's not like a huge deal. But, you know, from a uniformity, you like getting as close as you can. Make it nice and smooth. You're rolling it over. The big thing here is no wrinkles, all right? Because on the thinner grips, the wrinkles transmit through into the shaft. All right.
I feel like you're putting a rib in there.
Yeah, in a spot you don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
All righty, so that's what it is right there. So for you, now this thing just right there,
okay.
You should be good to go. So if it's going to stick out and be all bulbulous and stuff, yeah, that's probably not the best way to go about it. There's a machine out there that's a metered tape measure. So if you wanted 10 inches exactly every single time, it's got a gear in it that goes out to 10 inches and stops, so you know that you're there every time. There's also been I've seen guys take rulers and kind of attach it to those dispensers so they know where to go. You know, for a 10-inch go-no-go gauge, and just run it right out there and cut it off, so they can do that too. So the last bit of this is to check the specs. We're using the Mitchell Loft and Lie gauge is in order because it reads the same everything every time. And what we'll do is we found the lie angle during the fitting, and we got the loft specs from the new level golf site. So now it's just a matter of making them fit. And that's what we're going to do next. So we're going to be measuring. So we want 61.5, and it was 26. So we got 61.5 now, but we got 24. So in order to add a little bit of loft, we're going to go like this. So we pull towards you. It doesn't take a whole lot. And we're at 25 and some change, or 25. We'll give 25. It a little. Yeah, I'll give it just a little bit more. Now the question is, you want to hit it a little further?
Yeah, always.
All right, we'll leave it at 25 then. We'll just give you a degree stronger at that same number. And whenever you bend, you always check the lie angle again. Just make sure you're there. So we usually keep that number, and normally it's 4 degree increments, right?
Yes.
So the next one is, okay.
What do you do with somebody that wants to hit this iron a little further? So you're going to put a degree on. What is the average distance on
well, they want to hit a little further, you can give them a degree. Is it going to be a tremendous amount? No. No. You know, in everything that there is, if you're going to change something, you want to go like 2 degrees. Right, because one's almost non-existent when you go 2. But now you got to realize the balance of that. So now you just de-lofted, which means you're not going to get that same amount of height that you just had. Yes, it's going to go longer, and as you de-loft it, you're going to take off a little bit of spin. So keeping all those things in mind, if this guy doesn't spin the club very far or very much, well then go get the next club. Now, I will tell you about it, but I didn't want to show it to you because we're not at that point in time. Now, what we were doing is simple loft and lie changes, right? Up, down, back, forth. And I have what's called compound bending, where you try and get both of them at the same time.
Wow.
That takes a little bit. And basically, instead of going from here and here, you're here. And you pull, but you got to know how much you want to pull one way and the other in order to do it. And it takes a little practice. So get your old clubs out and see about a compound bend. You can get that. All right. So now spec'd out, laid out, ready to go. We just need to make them look good. So let's put some wax on.
Okay.
All right. So we finished the build. Specs came out really, really well. Richard did a heck of a job. All the swing weights came out pretty much right on line. There wasn't a variance at all. Frequencies came out is what we saw. You saw in the previous day. The lofts and lies, there were just tweaks to get them right to where we wanted them. Everything just turned out really well. So a well-balanced club, well-made club. You know, thanks to the new level for being very consistent. And again, we use not the 902s, which I keep calling them, I think, but they're the 1126s, so the most forgiving in the new level lineup. We're also using the KBS 105 tours. Now, we're finding out that the 105 is pretty much a sweet spot in a lot of shafts, even for the stronger golfer. Richard plays to a very low handicap. This just works. Okay, I'm beginning to believe that the 126, 130 was something to have based on the heads that were being used, the grips that were being used, but now, with technology the way it is, things that work out like they do, the lighter shafts create just a slight more club head speed, still allow you to have the control, still allow you to have the tour level profiles that people look for, and it's a win-win all the way around. And then you couple it with the Golf Pride grips, right? There's just so many, which turned out to work for Richard because he's got these really large hands.
I do.
And so we went with the CP2 wrap in the mid-size, and it has very little taper, which really worked for him. It was just a more comfortable fit. And we go, you know, and then back to the new level, a nice forged product. When we did the testing, it was far and away the best club to be had. So that was the stuff that we did. Now, the building process. So, you know, as I told you earlier, Richard's from Cedar Rapids area, and that's where I left to come here, so there's that connection. Also, there's a military connection. He was in the Marines, I was in the Navy. Did something very special in the Marines, just did something in the Navy. So it was all, you know, he wanted to get into club making, club building, club fitting because he saw an opening in the Cedar Rapids area. And from our discussion, it's just wide slam open. So he's going to put his footprint in there, and big things are going to happen. Went to GolfWorks, came back down and came to visit here after he saw us or found us on YouTube, and we talked a little bit, did a fitting. And that's how we came up with this, right? Did a fitting. And then the second time is after some extensive searching,
yes. And experiment on my own.
That he wanted us to make the new levels for him, and he wanted to watch me build. Okay, no problem. Well, that morphed into I want to build. I'm like, oh, okay, that's a neat idea. We haven't done that before. And that's what you saw. First time ever, right here, having somebody build. And we came along with that. And so it's always neat to see somebody getting into it from a new perspective, right? What did you learn? What did you do? Did you enjoy it? Let's start with that one.
First of all, it's very, the fitting experience I actually did on my birthday as a birthday gift to me. I found Jim online on YouTube video. I saw a bunch of his YouTubes, and he was a top 100 builder.
Fitter, yep.
And so I decided, after GolfWorks, I came down here and got a fitting, and it was the greatest experience of my life. I've had many fittings, but none like I've had here before. I went home, I bought a bunch of equipment, started my own business, but I knew that I needed to learn a little bit more from an expert. Jim fitted me with these new levels, and so I called Robin and said, hey, I'd like to come down and get the new levels. Can I build them myself? And Jim agreed, and it's been the greatest experience. I've learned so much. In fact, I have a set to build when I go home. So take these little tips of encouragement and go home and build a nice set of clubs for another person.
So, the biggest thing when it goes to club making, club building, club fitting is having a process, a workflow process, right?
Yes.
And you kind of fall into that. And there's a couple of ways, the reasons why you create a workflow. Number one is the space that you're working in, right? You're only relegated to what you can work in and work on, the tools that you have, and the types of repairs that you're going to be doing. So once you've figured out all that, then you can create a workflow. And it's really funny, you saw Richard, he was kind of, wondering what's going on because that whole shop's set up for a lefty.
It was. Everything was backwards.
Yeah, everything's set up for a lefty, and so he got through it very, very well for a righty. So that's the whole idea, is to present a workflow process. You want to be efficient in your movements. You don't want to go from here to there, from here to there, from here to there. You want to just step by step by step by step by step and get it done, because time is the ever killer, right? The more you waste, it doesn't do anybody good, and you can't get out and play golf. So that's the reason why. And so that's kind of the biggest thing, is to show them skills will develop, right? But the idea, the techniques, and the ideas is what you need to really plant, and that's what we did. And it was really some light bulb concepts really happened. So that's what it was. So if you're interested in the fitting, interested in the club building, send some comments in the show notes below.
Please do.
And as always, let's see your scores. Go low.